Before we get started, let me just say, I think all of us know that the legislature has introduced some amendments to our great Constitution and believe that the way that we become business friendly and end up being, as in my view, the worst state in the country for workers is that we put into our Constitution several amendments to it. The right to work for less amendment needs to be not just law, but it needs to be in our Constitution. The prohibition against public employees being able to bargain at the state, county, and city level, although it's current law, General Statute 9598 makes it illegal for city, county, and state to bargain collectively. But in order to be business friendly, we need to put it into the Constitution. And workers in this state will be subject to a situation in which they will not be able to use the majority to sign up if in fact they want a union. They're saying that we've got to protect a so-called secret ballot, which means that workers that somehow have only way to form an organization, decide if you want a union or not a union, you've got to go through this misguided secret ballot, not a majority to sign up or other means of having a union. So with that being said, one of the things I want to do before I do what I'm supposed to do is to say to you that if you want to be engaged in this fight, if you want to keep up with this fight and engaged in this fight, our staff will have, I believe it's on your table, sign-up sheets. These are not sign-up sheets that indicate that you're here. It's just to indicate that you want to be abreast of and be a participant in the fights around these issues. Now let me get on with the duty I've been assigned today. I'm so excited to be able to introduce Liz Shuler. I've got about a 2-page bio here that I'm going to put down. I'm not going to read it. Let me just tell you, in 2009, she was elected Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. But before that, she was out west, way out west, Portland, in fact. After getting all her degrees, she somehow ended up working for a building trade union, IBEW, National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Not just working for them, but ended up moving up through the ranks in terms of her positions with that particular local union. As an organizer, as a trainer, education trainer, for a number of years, developing skills in that union. Soon after that, the International Union, the Honorable Ed Hill, the International President asked her to come on board and work with him at the national union level, and which she did. Brothers and sisters, today you are blessed and we are blessed to have her with us. But before I end, there are 2 other things I want you to know about her. I served with her on the Executive Council of the National AFL-CIO, and she's truly committed around the new initiative in terms of getting young folks involved in our movement. And also I serve on the committee, and she chairs the committee of the reposition. But the last point I want you to know, that she is not only the youngest person to ever serve as an officer of this organization and on the executive council of this organization, but she's the chief, listen to this, this is important, this is how I close, the chief financial officer for our organization, the second in command in terms of our organization. Brothers and sisters, I need you to give a warm North Carolina welcome to my friend, my leader, Liz Shuler, Secretary-Treasurer of the National AFL-CIO.
James, oh my gosh, if I had 1/16 of your energy, I'd be doing really, really well. So James is obviously our esteemed leader, president of the North Carolina AFL-CIO. All of you know, and Mary B. McMillan, our secretary-treasurer, and the team sitting over here. So I just want to say thank you, of course, for all your hard work in the state, and what would we do without you. And certainly our Central Labor Council leader, Mike Gravities, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but Triangle Labor Council, who of course is also an important leader in the area. And we have a number of special guests in the room. I'm probably going to get in trouble for starting to name them, but Reverend B is here with us. We're so honored that you're here with us as well. We have Isaac with our national staff, and welcome. So I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you for coming today. We're so excited to have this conversation, this crucial conversation. I will let you know that I do have a little bit of North Carolina blood in me. My father was raised on the western, I don't know if Hollers is the right word, but on the border of Tennessee and western North Carolina. Bryson City. Anyone knows Bryson City? It's a teeny little town. Okay. I've been there a couple of times. I've got relatives all over the place down there. So just wanted to say, take it easy on me because I have a little bit of you know, running through these veins. So first of all, any March Madness fans in here? All right, UNC, Duke, North Carolina State. Say in a small voice. University of Oregon Ducks. Yeah. This is the kind of crowd we're in. So clearly that's one of the crucial questions, first of all, going on in the state. But that being said, there's a lot, I think a few more crucial questions going on in the state. Am I right?
That's right.
Yes. So the legislature, and James mentioned some of the things that have been going on. The debates and the discussions not only on unemployment and jobless workers and benefits for jobless workers and the legislature reducing the duration of benefits for unemployment. We have the scarlet letter on your driver's license, right? If you're a non-citizen, forget about it. Even immigrants with green cards and visas have to have this, right? There's much more. We've got the conservative wing in the legislature cutting the earned income tax credit for low-income families with kids, raising taxes on working families. They want to refuse federal assistance approved for states through Medicaid, right? What about denying health coverage to more than 500,000 North Carolinians? Does that sound right? They want to eliminate the state income tax and increase the sales tax, something that would hurt working families. We know this. They want to give the governor the ability to fire judges, environmental watchdogs, and the chair of the State Board of Education, so he can replace them with his hand-picked cronies. Okay? And I think the governor recently also made news coming after the educational elites. I put that in quotes, right? Just no shortage of headlines, I swear. And I heard something about female anatomy recently, about covering up, right? So they want to think about everything else except the issues at hand. And, while North Carolina families are struggling, this is what they're talking about. And so for all of this to be done also under the watchful eye of the state budget director, Art Pope. I know that he's sort of, shall we say, a version of the Koch brothers, am I right? And of course, unions are on heightened alert right now because we're focused on the outrageous attacks that are going on working people and unions. And the 3 constitutional amendments that James mentioned are obviously first and foremost for the folks coming from our movement. And it's just an egregious assault on workers' rights and democracy and the economy that we cannot ignore. And it's not just assaults on workers' rights. We're talking about attacks on public workers and education and voting rights and the middle class and low-income folks. And it's part of a national trend, to be honest. And I've seen this as I've traveled around the country in places like Wisconsin and Ohio and Indiana and Florida, and the list goes on, right? And this is a national trend that it's almost like it's a playbook. Coming out of a place called, anybody? ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council. I'm sure everyone's familiar, right? And it's coming at the expense of citizens and the economy, and it's really just put forward driving this business model, as James so articulately put forward, is this, union-free, business-friendly climate that really puts forward a narrow set of interests, doesn't it? And working people are very, very nervous in this economy. I don't need to tell you that. Let's take a look at what I mean specifically. I brought some slides with me, and hopefully I'm not in everybody's way. But right here you can see, and I'm going to use some data. I'm going to put out some numbers for folks to take a look at, because for the first time since the Great Depression, middle-class families have been losing ground for more than a decade. And that's even before the recession, right? And that is a big deal. Does that alarm anyone?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The annual income of the typical middle-class family shrank nearly $4,000 between the year 2000 and the year 2010 nationally. In North Carolina, around this same time period, the median household income dropped by almost $5,000. And that decline means all kinds of pressures on families, doesn't it? Also means a shrinking middle class. And it means less consumer buying power, which then translates into less demand, which then translates into a weaker economy. And that should concern business, right?
Yes.
As well as progressives and the union community. What about businesses? If they're not able to sell their products because nobody can afford to buy them, that's a problem. Why is this? Is productivity the culprit? You think workers are less productive? Is that why wages have been going down?
No.
All right. Got some smarty pantses in the room. Productivity, as you can see, in the dark blue line, and income in the light blue line, they rose together from World War II until about 1973. And then look what happens. They split, right? And workers have actually been producing more value, but incomes have been going down. So, do you think it's about education? These are all trick questions, by the way. All right, let's take a look at education. So incomes have actually stagnated or declined even for college students, or excuse me, college graduates. So it's not really about that. And the problem isn't just what young people are paid. It's about finding a job at all, right? We've been hearing about this so often these days. The unemployment rate for workers between the ages of 16 and 24 is twice that of the overall workforce. Anybody in here know someone between 16 and 24 that's actually unemployed, looking for a job, in your basement? I don't know. Yes, we all seem to know someone or someone who knows someone. And not to mention the student debt that young people are carrying when they come out of college and they can't find a job. It's almost like a double whammy. So over 4 decades, incomes have stagnated for middle-income people. And North Carolina, for example, hasn't become poorer overall. GDP actually grew by almost 22% between 2000 and 2011. Growth just didn't go to regular people. Okay, let's take a look. Nationally, more than half of all income growth between 1979 and 2007 went to the richest 10%. More than half. And look at how much went to the richest 1%. It's pretty staggering, isn't it? And that's a powerful statement about inequality. That's why those people were camping out in those parks, right, during the Occupy movement. And there's probably quite a few different reasons we could come up with for why this has happened. And I guess if we wanted to talk a little bit about it as a group, we could do that. I would argue that one of the reasons behind the stagnant middle class incomes and growing inequality is union membership has shrunk. There's a powerful relationship between the percentage of workers in unions and a share of income going to the middle class. And as union membership has declined, middle class incomes have declined right along with it. You can see the trend line, right? So on the other hand, when workers have a voice and can use their collective influence to actually, get higher wages and have a say on the job, it really does provide a direct boost to the middle class. So to sum up, middle class incomes have been shrinking despite productivity, despite education, and as a result, consumer buying power is shrinking, inequality is growing, and middle class incomes really shrink as union density decreases. They're connected. Meanwhile, corporate interests and ideologues, of course, are waging a legislative war against workers and unions. We heard about right to work and similar laws that are going on all across the country. And we can see why. Because it gets easier for those folks, right, when you don't have unions out there advocating for people. And you can see why these problems become not just union problems, but they become problems for all working people and employers. So here's someone that might be familiar to y'all. And when Henry Ford was, doing business back in the day, he basically recognized that when he paid workers a higher wage, it was better. It was better for the economy. It was better because they could afford to buy his cars, right? And I think that's a pretty iconic message. Now, Henry Ford, of course, had he's not a flawless individual, right? Especially in the union movement. We've had our share of tussles with folks in the auto industry. But I think the idea is that building a strong middle class can power sustainable growth and shared prosperity. And that was true even in Henry Ford's day. So, and here's the crux of why right to work, for example, is a problem for everyone, not just union members. And I think most of the folks in this room are probably already aware of this, but there's a couple of facts that we cannot leave on the table before we end today, and that is that right to work, it's a great slogan. It's one of the most infuriating things for us in the union movement because it somehow it's like a misnomer that just got out there and someone put it out there and ran with it. And it stuck. And James talked about this. It's a lousy name because it is completely false. It's not giving anyone the right to work. It gives them a right to starve, if anything, because it's not going to give anyone a right to a job, any other rights in the workplace. We call them right to work for less as well. If you have any other creative names that we can adopt instead of right to work, let me know. But basically, people in right to work states make lower wages. It's a bottom line. And we have study after study that proves this. About $1,500 per year on average in less wages in right to work states for working people. And fewer benefits, of course, too. Let's not even go there with health care and retirement security and all of that. And that's because these laws weaken unions by prohibiting them from essentially paying for the benefits that they get in the workplace. So the union comes in, negotiates a contract, they have to represent everyone in the workplace, whether you're paying dues money or not. So you're gaining all these great benefits, better wages from your contract, and you can say, you know what? I don't really feel like paying for that. I get it anyway. Is that fair? No. We don't think so either. So just for the record, though, under federal law, no one can be forced to join a union. Let's just get that out there. So in theory, there's really no reason to enshrine this in the Constitution, right? It doesn't take a trumped-up state law to accomplish that, because that right already exists. But we know what this is really about. So once again, we've got shrinking, I'm ahead of myself here. Shrinking wages, inequality, growing attacks on workers and unions that are bound to damage consumer buying power, the economy as a whole. We're seeing it now. And people want to say that unions are on the ropes, that they're a thing of the past, that they're really not needed anymore. Is that true, do you think?
No.
Right answer. No. I think there is, a lot of newspaper reporters and others in the blogosphere would love to write our obituary. Things are getting tough for unions, but we aren't going to just sit back and take it and not fight back, right? So it's partly right in some ways that, of course we are in a decline, and we're working to change that. We're working to change the way we do business and grow while we're fighting these state laws and state attacks. And I think there's a number of points during history where people have done this, kind of written us off and said, oh, they're dead, no way. There are a number of points during history where you can see that, and we came back stronger than ever. So let me put that out there for you, right? That we ain't going away anytime soon. Because working people innately need to work together. And that's what the union movement is all about, is a collection of people coming together to lift up their voices. And the power of collective action, there's nothing more powerful than bringing those voices together, especially in a union. So we believe that a progressive future is not possible unless working people have a stronger voice. And the best way for people to do that is to join together, join their voices together through collective action and collective bargaining in a union. So today we're pushing back against those attacks. We're mobilizing not just union members. And I think that is so evidenced in this room, right? That we're coming together as progressive activists, working people. Certainly, all of you in this room know something about that. And we're being proactive. We're going on offense to win investments in good jobs and infrastructure and worker-friendly economic development and immigration reform and so much more. But we understand that if we are going to be a solution for the future, for all working people, that we are going to have to look internally a little bit in the union movement and change ourselves. I mean, certainly we've been around for a very long time, and our structure perhaps hasn't changed as much along with the times maybe as the workplace has. So that's what we're trying to do now, is to start looking at how can we change to be more dynamic and more innovative and think about new models and new approaches. So that'll be an exciting chapter to be present for, to watch the union movement as we change. As I said, workplaces and the economy are too. And we're doing more to reach out to young workers. James mentioned earlier, we doubled our efforts not only with our own young union members to find space for them to exercise their ideas and creativity, but also building alliances with young progressives, young worker organizations that are on campuses and non-college youth as well. We're getting into spaces that we never have been before to really activate and energize young people on these issues. Certainly people with disabilities and seniors, and the list goes on and on with the different allied groups that we're working with. And as I said, you all are a perfect example of what's going on. We're working on being more collaborative, less top-down. We kind of have a little bit of a history of that. And also debunking stereotypes. I don't know how many of you have heard some of the negative stereotypes that have been out there. I'm sure it's pretty rampant in the crowds that, if you're at work and you're at the water cooler or at a dinner party or outside of your work life, sometimes you have these encounters. I know every time I get on an airplane, I have some kind of an encounter where I sit next to someone and they ask me, the first question is, what do you do? And I have a couple of options. I usually can say, well, I work for the union movement, yay! And the person sometimes will say, really? They're still alive? Or, and look back down at their book. Or, excellent, I love the union movement. And that happens about once in a blue moon. And then, sometimes I just figure, depending on where I'm headed, it's just not worth the energy sometimes, to convince people of what, you know, the union movement really stands for if they've already got predispositions in their head. And I'll tell you, I sat next to Frank Luntz on a plane once, who is the guru, communications guru for the right-wing agenda, basically. And he and I ended up having an actually interesting conversation. And hopefully it opens people's eyes, right, when you talk about who we really are and what we really do, and we're about to get to that. So we're trying to debunk those stereotypes, tell people, you know, our real story, and that we are innovating, we're putting values to work, which the values that we all stand for, right? Fairness and equality and voice and collective action and working for all working people and quality and preparing workers for the future. Certainly as we get into new technology and new, you know, the growth in the workplace and new arenas, we need to be preparing workers for those jobs. So let me give you a few of those examples. Did you know that the union movement operates the largest training program in the country, second to the US military? Who knew that? Raise your hand. a couple of hands go up. Who knew that employers actually seek out workers from our apprenticeship programs because of the quality and the skill that is unmatched? Maybe you were in one of those programs. No. Well, there you go. That's my union. Did you know that unions are deeply involved in their communities? Probably. And that a union actually founded the Guide Dogs of America program. Anyone familiar with that? Yeah, that was the Machinists Union. Whenever disaster strikes, who's the first to respond? Literally the jobs, right? The firefighters and the EMTs and all of those folks. But also skilled construction workers on the front lines of repairing and rebuilding that infrastructure, and nurses, and you know, not to mention the food drives and all the charitable work that goes on that unions are involved in. What about you all and your experiences with union members? Hopefully you have some good stories to tell. And that's what we need. We need folks like yourselves out there talking about the positive things that union members and the union family does. So we are partnering with new groups of workers that are very non-traditional and probably surprising to most people. People who haven't historically been covered by labor law, people who kind of fall through the cracks, you know, contract, freelance, part-time folks, day laborers, guest workers, domestic workers. Can you imagine the challenges, and many of you probably know, that domestic workers go through, especially people who live in, who don't have an end to their workday, for example. They're on call 24/7. Freelance television writers and music video dancers. And you would think that their job wouldn't be that, you know, noteworthy, but they have some insane working conditions. There was one that was telling me about body paint that they had to wear for this video, and they had a 14-hour day, sweating. I mean, it was insane what they had to go through. Taxi drivers, right? Car wash workers. Some of the most abused that fall through the cracks of labor law, but often are undocumented, can't speak up. Wage theft is rampant in these car washes. You have, you know, no safety equipment, dealing with harsh chemicals, out in the hot sun with no protection. So these groups of workers are coming together with the labor movement. They want to take collective action. They want to develop new ways to work together, even if they don't have a union. And that's what we're talking about here. So one of the best examples is Working America. And I know there's a new Working America chapter here in Greensboro.
They're here. The staff is here.
Fantastic. Yay, Working America. And I think you have about 26,000 members, somewhere around there. Is that right? Yeah. So Working America is the community affiliate of the AFL-CIO. And again, it's trying to organize the voices of hardworking people. There's canvassers that go out in neighborhoods and are trying to essentially go door to door and say, hey, you know what? These issues that have you kind of pissed off and you know that you're feeling left out, you can exercise your voice by joining Working America and have the power of 12 million working men and women behind you in the labor movement, because we all care about the same things, right? And this example that I was going to tell you about was Vicki, who basically, she was a school teacher, and she had, I think her grandson had special needs, and she was really upset that budget cuts were going to be affecting the programs that affected her grandson. And she was really worried about it, and of course sitting in her house feeling pretty powerless. And a canvasser from Working America knocked on her door. And they said, hey, do you have any concerns about the economy and kind of what's happening? And she said, you dang right I do. And so she gave him an earful. And lo and behold, she had a way to actually impact change. She joined Working America, and not only did she sign up and become an activist, but then she went to her workplace and signed up a bunch of people in her workplace to be Working America members. And before you knew it, this was a growing contingent of activists that actually could pressure lawmakers and educate people and really bring these voices to bear in the debate. And I think that was a really good example of, a lot of people are sitting in their homes feeling powerless, right? So I think that's something we should be telling folks too, is that Working America is a real option for people who want to be a part of this. And that's the goal, right? Is we're looking to empower workers and bring collective voices to bear, bring a sound economy to North Carolina for all working people. And I hope that you will support us. And James kind of pulled the trigger already and asked you to sign up, and I know there's some sign-up sheets going around the room. But we've got some pretty insane fights going on in North Carolina for the union movement and for working people generally. So now's the time. I hope that you will join us. Let's work together. I'd love to hear your ideas and figure out a way that we can work together to make change. So that's all I have.
We always leave a few minutes for questions. So does anybody have any questions for Liz about the AFL-CIO, the labor movement, some of the issues that we're facing, especially in Washington and Raleigh?
I was going to ask was what are some of the issues in Washington? We're from, probably there's issues here in North Carolina we prefer not to think about for a while. Our sense is that while there's a lot of gridlock in Washington, maybe things are a little better there. What's going on? What's at the top of the agenda? Not much better, but
not much better.
What are the fights that are really front and center right now?
Well, certainly sequestration and the fiscal showdown that has been haunting us for months now, and it's a manufactured crisis, we believe, that is taking our eye off the prize, which is really about job creation and investing in getting people back to work. And for whatever reason, that has never quite gotten the traction that it deserves by our policymakers, and they would rather just fight with each other and create chaos in Washington, and partisan politics are alive and well, and that's been really frustrating. And then immigration reform, I would say, is sort of the next big issue looming that we think will get legislative action this spring, that we're mobilizing around, and we have a campaign going all across the country to get activists engaged and pressuring their lawmakers, and we hope that folks will be a part of that campaign as well.
Barbara? Thank you so much, Liz. I just wanted to make a statement, if I could, and kind of wrap it. Because I think if you look at the United States map politically, the majority of the votes against labor still come south of the Mason-Dixon line. And I think in this conversation about labor, we're going to have that at some point. In North Carolina, in 1868, right after slavery, the first constitution, it was blacks and whites that came together. And they rewrote our constitution, and they put something in there because they knew that slavery was about labor rights. or at least the denial of labor rights. And it certainly was about cheap labor. So they put in the Constitution life, liberty, and the enjoyment of the fruit of your labor. That was a specific understanding that in the South, labor rights and racial equality and the denial of labor rights have to be together. And we almost have to retool ourselves on that today, because oftentimes we do presentations both in civil rights and in labor, and we never mention race, which is the Achilles heel in the South. You look at 1968 when they stopped the civil rights movement. Why? Because tearing down Jim Crow and voting rights and segregation was also about labor rights. And now you get 2008 and you get this new president, you get possibility, and what are we seeing again? Attack on labor rights and voting rights simultaneously. Why? Because the new demographics of America signal to some people a change they cannot stop. The only way they can stop it or slow it down is to attack labor rights, civil rights, and LGBT rights, and immigrant rights. That's the only way they can slow it down. So one of the things I'm pushing for, and I think a lot, is that in our conversation about labor, we've got to have a fresh conversation about 21st century fusion politics. I think it's good to talk about the middle class and the working class, but we've also got to raise the issue of the poor.
Right.
And we must have this conversation, because when CIO came south after World War II, it was race that undermined Operation Dixie. Nobody took that issue on up front and recognized that every time you come south, the white bosses are going to turn folk against each other based on race. That's why that law is in our books from 1959. I was telling Chris, what happened in '58? Montgomery. Why did they pass that law? Why did all white men put that law in the state legislature in '59? Because they were afraid that the union movement was going to hook up with the civil rights movement in the South and transform it, which is why the March on Washington was really about jobs and justice. It wasn't about Dr. King talking about I have a dream. The dream was about understanding the connection between civil rights. So one of the things I found, I just want to say, and I'm glad you brought that, is that I hope that in our conversations about who the union is, that we remind all of us, black, white, immigrants, that the union movement was at the center of the civil rights movement. And that any movement to beat these crazy folk today, and I hope the media hears that, I did say crazy. You said insane, so either way. It's got to be, especially in the South, because that's really where the breach still is. If we change, and the demographics, the last word, in Georgia and Mississippi and in North Carolina and a couple other southern states, you change 3% of the black vote, 3% of the white vote, you bring the LGBT vote, you lift the immigrant vote, you break the solid South, you break the solid South, you bust the union busters. And we gotta have that conversation in some real ways.
I'm glad you raised that, and absolutely, could not agree more. The movements are intertwined, and one of the things we've really been working on is to broaden and deepen our community relationships and relationships with allied and partner organizations, because it used to be that, you know, we would get together for a fight and then we'd kind of drop off, right? And I think we would come out and look for partners in a labor fight, and then when you'd need us for some other fight, we'd be like, yeah, our fight's over, so thanks so much. And so I think what needs to happen now, and what is starting to happen, is this relationship that's not transactional, but as we say, transformational, so that it's long-term, it's deep, it's partnership that transcends just the next fight. So I think it's dead on with exactly what you're talking about. Yes. I'll let you be the moderator.
Okay, a couple more. I got to go ahead and then you.
My name is John Dow's Laughing House. I'm president of the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union and Analytical Workers Local 150.
Wow.
And happy to have you here, Liz, and again, happy to see our elected official, Sister Ross, who's always stood with us, and attorneys like Bob Willis, and certainly one of our paramount statewide leaders, the Reverend William Barber, who has helped us to begin to connect up with each other with the historic thousands on Jones Street. It's been playing a significant role, always raising up the question of working people and labor rights. But more importantly, I think we have a challenge here. We have to build a very broad and deep social justice movement. And I guess this is just as good as any place to start that, discussion. Got to have a strategic plan about how do we deepen and broaden our movement right now. To everyday working people, the people who are working in hotels, the people who are working, these little part-time temporary jobs, the unemployed who they just slashed down. We need to figure that out in some sort of joint session with all the representatives here from the many organizations. Obviously, I don't have the answer, but I know that building that kind of broad, deep, strategic movement has to be a part of our discussion other than just the education. Certainly, we need that PowerPoint. We need to take it to every church, every youth group. I know my son's a leader in the Hip Hop for Justice movement. Need to bring it there since they know very little about the role of unions. We need to take it any and everywhere. So we're going to need that as a tool, as you know. But more importantly, we're going to need everybody in this room to begin conversations with the different organizations and church groups and community groups about how do we do deeper education for the referendum that's coming up in 2014.
Yes, thank you for mentioning
and
that.
I want to get some of your thinking. You've faced some of this nationally, since this is a national reactionary movement that's trying to beat labor down, beat working people down. Just wondering what some of your thinking is on how do we build this kind of broad, deep movement.
Right, and could not agree more, brother. And I think one of the things that I picked up on, of course, was your mentioning your son, and I think the next generation, right, is who we should really be honing in on, not to downplay the importance of, seniors and other groups, but young people, especially today, that are suffering in the economy and don't necessarily haven't had exposure to the labor movement because our numbers have shrunk so much that used to be everyone knew someone in a union. You had an uncle or a cousin or someone that you knew in your family. And now it's a great-grandparent, if anything. So I think reaching out to the next generation, that's why I've been working so hard to get our young workers involved in the labor movement now, is I just feel like they are our hope. If we don't have them, forget about it, right? So I think that's one piece of it. And as you mentioned, broadening and deepening these relationships so that they're transformational, not just transactional, but looking outside our own interests, beyond kind of what's parochial and sort of union specific, and look at the broader community fights, if you will. One of the experiences I had during the election was in Wisconsin, where of course, labor rights were under direct attack. We were out canvassing, and we were out actually canvassing neighborhoods that weren't just union households, but community, communities that were about getting people to care about whether it was a stoplight that might, be needed on the corner, or a new grocery store, or, whatever is important to the community, showing that labor can be an ally in making that kind of change, I think is really important.
Last question? Wait.
Thanks. My name is Noah Stroke. First of all, I wanted to thank you for coming. I really appreciate all that you're doing. My question really is about the way that you foresee retooling the union movement. Because, as you know, there's an image problem, right? And it's not just on the right wing, but it's also in the Democratic Party, and it's among liberals.
Yes.
Right, about feeling like unions are corrupt. And this is, it goes back to the 1940s and 50s with the whole campaign starting, anti-union campaign starting, and really convincing people that union leaders are bosses and this is a top-down.
Mafia.
Right. So, and all the movies that came out about that. So, my question is about the retooling and the re-imaging. Because I wanted to second what the Reverend said about the maybe an over-focus on the middle class and not enough on the poor and lower class. Because the way that you made your presentation the title of it was "Why Unions Are Good for Business," and you even have Ford up there, right? The arch enemy, right? You have Ford because he said that it was good to give middle class people better wages because then, well, of course, then they won't have to join the union, right? So what I wonder about is whether or not there's another way of doing this instead of retooling the image based on kind of like a trickle-up economic model. Because I just don't see business people buying it, first of all. And second of all, I think it's maybe getting away from the union roots a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, sure.
Because, you know, I've been reading a lot of stuff about the European labor movement recently. And, you know, for example, in France, where the union density is really low, but they're much more visible, and they actually get, you know, they win more fights in some ways.
Right.
So I wonder if maybe there's another way of going about things that can mobilize the union base that already exists more and convince people who aren't in unions to get behind them based on kind of old school practices and not this appeal to business. You know
Well, there's
what I mean?
a lot there that you've touched on, and just in a nutshell, I wanted to just raise a few things that we've been working on. And I mean, the business piece is more probably Main Street, not Wall Street, obviously. Just, you know, working with small businesses and showing that we can be solutions oriented. Everyone already knows that unions can fight and we can be out in the streets and shutting down traffic, but also we can bring solutions to the table to make small, medium-sized, and sometimes big, large businesses more profitable, because that ultimately is better for workers to get their slice of the pie, right? And you know, we get more in wages and benefits when our companies are successful. So that's kind of the narrow kind of message I was trying to drive home there. But we definitely have an image problem. We're trying to work on not only the way we talk, but the cultural and behavioral changes in our union movement that in some rare cases might have lived up to the stereotype. You know, I can be honest. There are some places where there's a lot of old traditions that haven't been modernized, and that's one thing that we're going to need to look internally on. And so we've been launching, like I said, kind of some new messaging to talk about how everyone is connected through their work and that we're not so different when you're outside a union. We all work for a living, right? And no matter what kind of work we do, we take pride in that work. There's dignity and respect in work, and we should all be fairly compensated for our work. And so we have this Work Connects Us All website that we built to try to get people outside our movement to think differently about their work and how we're all essentially have the same values, right? Then the second piece of that is really showing on a street level way what unions do. And I was touching on that a bit with, you know, not only are we, you know, representing union members, but we're a part of the community, and that, you know, we stand for quality and training and, you know, again, a values-based approach that is a street level type of change as well to go along with the way we're, you know, kind of messaging differently. And so if you want to take a look at a new website, we just launched another tool in our arsenal called At Work. And what it does is it lifts up all of the amazing examples of the work that's going on at the street level, whether it's, you know, the training that I mentioned, Guide Dogs of America and the charitable work that goes on in the community, is it quality and some of the initiatives that are going on with teachers, you know, to upgrade skills, and electricians who have the code of excellence, where they are the best, highly skilled, highly trained workers you can find in the world. But getting all of those positive messages out there, you know, in this environment, we've had an assault for, what, 30, 40 years against unions that have got us where we are today. So it's going to be a long-term effort to try to rebuild the confidence and really connect with people's hearts as well as their minds, because we can offer facts. Their ears are closed because they've been, you know, listening to these stereotypes for so long that they don't even hear us anymore. So reconnecting with people based on those shared values, and then showing how we can together, you know, lift up wages and conditions and be a movement.
Maybe you want to say
It's a
one thing?
long-winded answer, sorry.
Yeah, before folks leave, I just want to make sure that you take some of the materials that are on your table, and if you want to connect with the North Carolina AFL-CIO and stay abreast of what we're doing here in North Carolina, it's got information about how to sign up and get our emails and how to contact us. And I sense a lot of energy in this room to engage in this fight. So I want to make sure that any of you who want to be engaged in the fight around these amendments sign one of the sign-up sheets and the tables, and also take this fact sheet. This is the first one of many that we'll be producing about these amendments and how ridiculous they are. This is an opportunity for us, folks. It's an opportunity for us to educate people about unions and why they are so important for all of us. It's an opportunity to build and grow this movement that we're trying to grow here in North Carolina with labor, civil rights, people of faith. So I am asking you for your help. Sign up that you will be engaged in this campaign around the amendments. Take the material and begin educating folks. Stand with us as we try and build and expand this movement for economic justice in North Carolina. Thank you.
And let's thank Liz.
For staying here with us the whole time. Very impressive. And thanks to all of you, and can't wait to continue this fight together. Sounds like you got your work cut out for you. You just sign that sheet, please.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.